Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Dan and today I want to talk about the Streets of Rage remake. The Streets of Rage remake is a loving recreation of the trilogy on the Sega Mega Drive. The game features every single stage from the original games, including completed versions of some unfinished stages from Streets of Rage 3, as well as a bunch of brand new stages. And on top of that, we've got 18 playable characters. Axel from Streets of Rage 1, 2 and 3, Blaze from 1, 2 and 3, Adam recreated and updated from Streets of Rage 1, Max from Streets of Rage 2, Skate from 2 and 3, and Zan from Streets of Rage 3. Then we have the secret unlockable characters from Streets of Rage 3, Rue the Kangaroo, Ash, who was removed from the American and European versions of the game but was unlockable in the Japanese version, and Shiva from Streets of Rage 2 and 3. The Streets of Rage 2 version of Shiva was never playable in the original game. And then we have the 3 characters who were never playable to begin with, Mr.X, the final boss, L or Electra, who was a sub-boss in Streets of Rage 2, and Rudra, a completely original character. All the characters play similarly to how they played in the original games, but with additional features for the older characters, such as the ability to run and dodge roll, or perform special attacks and star moves.
But before you start playing, you have a choice of 1 or 2 players, or if you're on your own, you can choose a computer-controlled ally with different behaviour settings. Once you've picked your characters, you'll get a choice of where you'd like to start. Route 1 is the Streets of Rage 1 route, the second is the Streets of Rage 2 route, and the third and fourth routes are a bit of a mixed bag of Streets of Rage 3 stages and new stages. This is because the game features branching paths. You could start on the Streets of Rage 2 path and end up on the freight elevator from the first game, or at the construction site from the third game. And taking different routes will lead you to one of the 3 final areas from the 3 games, and to also getting different endings, and there are 8 of them. Getting them all will be pretty challenging. But even if you don't manage to beat the game, you'll be rewarded with a cash prize, which you can spend in Blaze's shop. In here you can unlock extra characters, and a selection of cheats. There are silly cheats like all enemies explode when killed, or all swords become lightsabers. And also real cheats like infinite special gauge and infinite lives. Then there are a bunch of extra modes like survival and boss rush, and even volleyball, plus things like editing character palettes and level select. All of these things are great, but I think my favourite part is all of the tweaks you can make to the game to be able to play it the way you want to. In the options menu, we have the usual things like level of difficulty and lives, but there are also options like damage between players. With this set to no, you won't be able to harm your partner. You also won't be able to grab them. This means you won't be able to perform team attacks. In Streets of Rage 1 and 3 you could perform team attacks, where you could launch your ally at an enemy and perform a very strong attack. This feature was removed in Streets of Rage 2, though you could still grab and damage your ally. Next we have the option for star moves, otherwise known as blitz attacks. They introduced this mechanic in Streets of Rage 2. Double tapping forward then attacking would perform the character's blitz technique. However, Streets of Rage 3 expanded on this by adding additional levels. For every 40,000 points you gain without dying, you'll gain a star, with the maximum being 3 stars. This affects the way blitz attacks work as well as how much damage they do. However, you lose a star every time you die. You can also perform the different levels of Blitz Moves by pressing the X button plus a certain sequence of directions. Each character's sequence is different though, so you'll need to try them out for yourself. Anyway, with the option set to B button, you'll perform your leveled up Blitz move by double tapping forward and pressing the attack button. This is exactly like it was in Streets of Rage 3. However, if you set it to the X button, when you double tap forward B, you'll always perform your standard blitz, and if you double tap forward X, you'll perform the blitz relevant to your star level. Next we have the option Weapon Type. What this does is changes the way weapons work. In Streets of Rage 1, the player drops their weapon when they are knocked down or thrown, and you cannot drop your weapon manually. In Streets of Rage 2 you can now throw your weapon with the Z button, or holding B and pressing C. However, you now drop your weapon if you are grabbed, or are grabbing an enemy, as well as when you are thrown or knocked down. And Streets of Rage 3 is similar to Streets of Rage 1, except you can now throw your weapon. However, weapons now have health bars and will break when used.
Next up is the option meter type. This affects the timer and the gauge in the centre top of the screen. The timer is fairly straightforward. It counts down, and when it reaches 0, you die. The timer resets quite often though, so it isn't too much to worry about. You get bonus points at the end of a stage based on the time remaining. If you turn this option off, you won't get any bonus points. The gauge was something that was implemented in Streets of Rage 3. In Streets of Rage 2, each character was given special moves that you could use by pressing the A button or forward an A. The A button special is sort of your desperation attack. If you get surrounded, it will usually knock them away. It's not particularly strong, but it does have invincibility frames. Your forward A is your offensive special. It does more damage but has no invincibility frames. This can leave you open to attack. Each time you use one of these techniques, you would lose 1/13 of your maximum health. Then, in Streets of Rage 3, the special gauge was incorporated. When the gauge was full, you could perform any one of your specials without a health penalty. However, if you use a special when it isn't full, your health will be reduced. The emptier the gauge, the more damage you receive, so be careful. The gauge fills up very quickly though, taking just around 4 seconds. Keep the gauge on and you'll use the Streets of Rage 3 rules. Turn the gauge off and you'll use the Streets of Rage 2 rules. Next up is combo type. This one is fairly straightforward. In Streets of Rage 1 and 2, if you mash the attack button without coming in contact with an enemy or destructible object, you would only perform the first hit of your combo. But in Streets of Rage 3, you would perform the entire string regardless of whether you hit anything. Another difference with the Streets of Rage 2 version is that it takes longer to be able to start moving after performing a hit than it does in the Streets of Rage 3 version. It might be worth taking that into consideration when choosing. Next is jump type. This is a pretty important option. Starting with Streets of Rage 2, once you've jumped, you are completely committed to it. You have absolutely no air control. This is the more realistic option. Streets of Rage 3 has a huge amount of air maneuverability, completely unrealistic but way more useful and much safer to use. And Streets of Rage 1 is exactly the same as Streets of Rage 3, except you can also choose the direction of your jumping attack. Even more unrealistic, but it gives you more ways to attack, and I'm all for that. Up next we have death type. In all 3 games, when you die, you flicker away, then drop down from the sky, causing all enemies to fall over. However, setting it to Remake will make you get right back up, recovering your health and getting you right back into the action. And last but not least, we have the option use guns. Spread throughout stages, you might come across these new weapons: the pistol, the Uzi, and the bazooka. They all have limited ammo and only appear on certain stages. Turning this option off will remove them from those areas. That's everything in the game options. Now moving on to video options. Don't worry, I'm not covering everything. Moving down to visual effects, we have the Streets of Rage option or the Remake option. This changes several visual effects in the game. Too many to list, but some of the more noticeable ones are the little sparks that accompany a successful hit, and the kicked up dust from hitting the ground. Then we have shadows. We've got Reflected, Rounded, and Streets of Rage. Reflected gives you a full shadow that copies everything you do. It is even affected by light like those in Barbon's bar. Rounded gives you a simple, rounded shadow, a typical shadow that would be used in most classic games. And Streets of Rage, which has a shadow that copies your movement but stays firmly underneath you no matter the lighting. Then we have the option for blood. No, this isn't a censorship thing where the blood is replaced by sweat or green goo. With this set to no, enemies will shed no blood whatsoever, much like in the original games. Set it to yes, and using sharp weapons like knives and katanas will cause blood to be shed. Additionally, killing some enemies with sharp weapons can slice them in two. It's pretty brutal. Moving on to audio options, we have Last Breath. In Streets of Rage 1, when the final attack hits, the enemy performs their death scream. But in Streets of Rage 2, they begin their scream once they've hit the ground. Neither of these affect the death scream from a throw. Next is voice type. This affects many of the Streets of Rage 3 characters and enemies. Most notably, Streets of Rage 3, Axel, Blaze, and Shiva. When this is set to Streets of Rage 3, Axel's becomes Blaze's becomes and her becomes and Shiva's becomes... And then we have sound effect type. What this does is changes the sounds of your hits. When set to Streets of Rage 2, it has the Streets of Rage 2 hits. Set it to Streets of Rage 3 and you'll have the Streets of Rage 3 hits. And combined makes it so that characters and enemies use their own sound effects from their own games. So much attention to detail. We're almost done, guys, now we're on to miscellaneous. Camera type affects how fast the screen scrolls. In Streets of Rage 2 the camera is slow, while in Streets of Rage 3 it's always trying to keep up with you. Streets of Rage 2 is safer for higher difficulties when you want to try to limit enemy spawns, since they pop up when the camera reaches certain points. You don't want to get overwhelmed. Then we have the Streets of Rage 3 exceptions. This is a really important option. When this is set to yes, some important rules change. When you grab an enemy and you attack them, if the attack comes in contact with a different enemy, you let go of the first enemy. This can be good for characters with slow grab attacks because you can then combo into your regular attack string, but this isn't always a good thing if you are trying to throw someone. Another thing that changes is something unique to Streets of Rage 1 characters. In that game you could do this weird thing where you could attack in front and behind you by mashing left and right while attacking. This can be very useful, but it only affects Streets of Rage 1, Axel, Blaze and Adam. The biggest and probably most important change is you are unable to run diagonally. The moment you try and move up and down while running, you'll revert back to walking. This is just like the way it works in Streets of Rage 3, but being able to run diagonally is unbelievably useful, especially against faster enemies on harder difficulties. I highly recommend setting this option to no. Next is collision type. This is just a visual option. In games like these there are things called hitboxes. Should your attack hitbox overlap an enemy's hitbox, the attack will connect. What this option does is affects the visual of an attack hit, the little spark that occurs when an attack connects with an enemy. When it's set to Streets of Rage 2, the spark appears at the very edge of the attack's hitbox. This is very apparent on long range attacks like Blaze's Kikosha. When this is set to Streets of Rage 3, the spark appears on the spot that actually connects with the enemy. This one makes the most sense. Next up is an amazing addition, Enable Police. You might remember in the first game you could press the A button and call in your cop buddy for help. He'd drive up and blast all enemies on screen. This was replaced in the second and third game with special attacks. However, in this game you can have both at the same time, as the police action is set to a new button. I used the big touchpad on the PS4 controller as a big emergency kill everyone on screen button and it works wonders. You might be thinking, does everyone call the police? Even Mr.X? Well, only the heroes can call for police backup. Even Rue has a whistle he can blow to call for help. However, everyone else has their own use for the button. Shiva transforms and gains incredible speed for a while, the kind of speed he uses in his boss fights that's really annoying. Rudra does some fancy ninja arts and burns all enemies on screen. Elle channels electricity into her hands and does an explosive blast. And Ash does this. Still, at least it's better than Mr.X's, you've basically thrown away 10,000 points. The benefits these characters have is that they can be used anywhere. The heroes can only call police backup in accessible areas. The police call is more powerful though, so it balances out. Here's an option if you feel like playing like the first or second game, Enable Run and Roll. Set this to off and you can walk everywhere. Are you bored yet? Yeah, me too. Anyway, you can set this to Streets of Rage 3 or Bare Knuckles 3. When Bare Knuckles 3 was brought over for the American and European release, they made a few changes, one of which was the increase to the distance you move when you dodge roll. Set this to Bare Knuckles 3 and you'll do a short roll. Set it to Streets of Rage 3 and you'll do a long roll. And finally, there is pause delay, probably the most important option in the game, since it has such a huge impact. By default, this is set to combined. This makes it so every character attacks with the same speed they had in their original games, so Streets of Rage 2 characters would attack the slowest, and Streets of Rage 3 characters would attack the fastest. You can change this to Streets of Rage 2 and make everyone attack really slow. or you can change it to Streets of Rage 3, which is the fastest, or you can set it to Remake, which is a speed between 2 and 3.
I think that's more or less everything on the Streets of Rage remake. Special thanks to the Streets of Rage remake community forum for helping with some of the information gathering and helping keep this game alive. If you're interested in trying out this game for yourself, you can download the most up-to-date version completely free off of the Streets of Rage community forum. I've also uploaded a backup of the game to Mediafire, links to both in the description. And thanks for watching guys, this video took me weeks to put together, because I really wanted everything to be correct and informative, and I certainly hope that came across in the video. This is definitely one of my favourite games and it deserves some love, so get downloading it and play it for yourself. And let me know in the comments what you think. Did this video help convince you to give it a try? Was the video informative enough? Seriously, I love reading comments from you guys. It gives me the boost to make more of these types of videos. And as always guys, if you found this video useful or informative, drop it a like, and subscribe to keep up to date with my latest videos. And until next time guys, catch you later.